Unspoken Issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. It's a double shot. That's right. We're coming back at you again. It's me. It's Chris Armstrong. It's Evan Bevins. And we're not going to be talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as long as we did last time. Matter of fact, we're not going to be talking about them much at all here. We're going to be talking about the X-Men. And there's a reason for this. Chris Armstrong's going to tell everybody why we are picking X-Men Adventures this evening, our own issues, which kind of put me at a disadvantage since I'd never read any before. But I was a fan of the television series. But I want to let Chris step in here and tell everybody what the thoughts were that were going through his mind that made this show possible. What was up there, Chris?
Yeah, I was really looking to do something to coincide with the X-Men 97 series, which is dropping on Disney Plus. I think we're all big fans of the X-Men animated series from the 90s. And I never really read a lot of the X-Men Adventures series, which adapted that animated show. I read I think I maybe had the first one or two, and then I kind of like, well, these are just the same as the cartoon, so spend my money on other stuff. But yeah, I thought it'd be a cool idea to look at we each pick an episode or an issue of the X-Men Adventures comic book, and just a little unspoken epic style where we look at three different issues, and we each picked our own. And I think we got one from the first season and a couple from the second season.
Yeah. So, Evan, why don't you tell us about your history with X-Men, the animated series?
Well, I remember being very excited when it came on. Unfortunately, I got food poisoning the night before the second episode. So didn't get the resolution of the Night of the Sentinels cliffhanger. Well, I was watching it in my hospital room, and the doctor came in and kept turning it down when I kept turning it up because she was explaining to my mom what had happened to me and how long I was going to be in the hospital. I'm like, you don't understand X-Men, the animated series. And then I think not long after that, I had a church youth group trip, so I missed the third episode, but I found a comic book where we were, comic book shop, and I got X-Men Adventures number 3, so I read the issue even though I hadn't seen the episode.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember I know you've shared with me that story before about getting food. No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm glad
new to me.
This is a classic. One of the epic moments in Evan Bevan's history, because I remember you talking about that incident. And you said did your dad bring you some comics? Is that what you said?
My stepdad brought me a Marvel Superheroes special that contained the first appearance of Squirrel Girl.
There it is. That's what I remember it from. Okay.
And history was made.
Yes, sir. Yes, it was.
Monumental weekend in my life. I also didn't eat Arby's for like 2 years after that.
That's rough. I'll go ahead and tell my personal history with it. Now, here's the thing. When did the series launch? Was it 92 or 93?
I think it was 92 because the comics where Marvel revisits that are always referred to as X-Men 92.
Okay. All right. So the thing is with the animated series, you have to transport yourself into the boonies of Marietta, I guess you would say, because
31st of 92, by the way.
Okay. So in 93, I'm sure I caught some episodes in 92, but in about March of 93, maybe it was May, we ended up moving. And where I was living at before, it wasn't in the middle of town or anything, but we had cable. Well, we moved to a place that we decided we weren't going to get cable anymore. We were going to rely on the bunny ears. We were going to rely on the large antenna that went up the side of the chimney. And we could not pull in Fox to save our butts sometimes. So Saturday mornings for me in 93 was a struggle to try and watch the show. That's not saying that I wasn't trying, because I was into what I was watching. There was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on after that. I cannot recall.
I think on weekdays, maybe later on.
Okay.
Maybe not right. No, maybe not. I don't think Power Rangers came around until 93.
I'm associating those two for some reason in my head. I feel I was watching X-Men and then I was not watching Power Rangers because it was on shortly thereafter, but maybe it could be something else. And then as So that was 90. That was 93, 94. I mean, I start going to college in 96, and that's when I start getting cable back. But I think by that time, I'm not watching any cartoons very much at all. And that's Saturday because I'm in college. Usually I'm sleeping in till about, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So on a Saturday. But yeah, I mean, I still enjoyed what I was watching. I always had a respect for it. I think there were some very iconic episodes that I can remember. I can remember, we were just talking about this, the Days of Future Past episodes. I can remember was it Bishop or was it Cable that was involved in those? Because I feel it was a switch.
It was Bishop.
Like, it was Bishop. Okay.
Bishop instead of Kitty Pryde.
Right.
Kind of mashed those stories together.
I remember those. And when Disney Plus rolled around, I was, I want to get back into this. I'm going to watch these again. Never did. Now I have an excuse though, because the X-Men 97, I should have been watching those and keeping up, or I should revisit those to get ready for X-Men 97. But anyway, so there's kind of my struggles to watch the show. As much as I loved it, I still didn't have cable, and it was tough to kind of pull it in. Plus, the only TV that had the antenna was in the main living room, so I didn't have the TV in my room. I picked up NBC. Boy, I could tell you how much Seinfeld I watched. Wow.
Oh yeah.
I watched a lot of Seinfeld.
I don't really see what the problem is with not having cable, because he was only in a few episodes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I blame you for that, Chris. Yes, you did. You bastard. So Chris, what about your experience with the animated series?
Yeah, I was pretty pumped about it when it started up. I was thinking that there was more distance between Batman the animated series and X-Men, but apparently I'm looking at Batman premiered September 92, so only about a month, maybe almost 2 months earlier.
Oh, wow.
Because as much as I loved Batman at the time, X-Men was the preferred. Now looking back, Batman was a way better show, but I loved X-Men, and I still like the animated show. I actually you were talking about catching up before the new series. I just finished watching the series last week. I'd been kind of slowly going through it pretty much since the launch of Disney Plus, and because I watched maybe up through the 3rd season of the show back then and kind of lost track. So I was able to watch. There were some pretty cool episodes in the later seasons. There's a 4-parter that has all of the Apocalypse, Sinister, Magneto, Sabretooth are all in there. Some pretty crazy stuff in some of those episodes. But yeah, I loved the X-Men animated series. And I got the Pizza Hut VHS.
Yeah.
On VHS. I think they did a couple of those. I don't think I only ever had the first one, but yeah, I loved I would always, Saturday mornings, I would have a fresh videotape every Saturday to record a bunch of cartoons, and most of them I would watch once or twice, and then that would be it. But yeah, I loved the show.
Well, as far as X-Men and the comics, I was reading a lot of mutant related titles. That's for sure. In 92, 93, all the way up. I was still getting cable. I was still getting X-Man come 96, still on my pull list. When I'd come home from OU, I'd go to the comic store. Lonnie's down here in Marietta. And I mean, he'd have a stack full of mutant related stuff along with some Image stuff. So I was into the X-Men. So for sure, I was enjoying what I was getting in the comics. But yeah, as far as the show goes, that was what made it more exciting. We were going to get the X-Men in animated form, and what stories are going to be told, and they were telling some good ones. So, but yeah.
Also really cool that they used the Jim Lee era X-Men designs for all the characters, and that was the team they used, and they did a really good job of staying true to the characterizations from the comics. They didn't stray too much from the comics. They adapted a lot of the big storylines, and they were a little different, but they stayed pretty faithful to the spirit of X-Men comics.
Okay. Well, so we each chose an issue, and I heard there was rumblings I was going to pick a time travel issue. Hey, Jesse, going to pick a time travel issue.
What was the first example you gave of a story they adapted? Oh, they did stories like Days of Future Past.
Yeah. So I'm okay. Well, I'm going to stick around in season 2. And the first one that caught my eye was a cable-centric issue. And I was like, this is the one I'm going to do. And then I find out it's a 2-parter. I'm not going to do it. So I stuck with the second season. I think there was 13 issues, I believe, in the second season that adapted the second season, I think. Maybe more. But anyway, there were a few episodes / comics that kind of caught my eye, but the one that I landed on was Mojoverse one. So it was issue 11. But we need to go chronologically here, I think, is the best way to go about this. So who picked the one from the first season?
That would be me.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Issue.
Oh, really? Was it? Okay.
Maybe not fully double, but exercised.
Okay.
Well, and part of it was with the files on the characters
Yeah.
in the back. But yeah, I picked it because it was my favorite episode of the series.
Okay.
And I watched it again after I read it, and you know what? It still holds up.
Does it? Good. That's
Oh,
good.
yes.
That's good. Well, I'll turn it over to you, sir. You will have control here. Go for it.
Okay, well, we're looking at X-Men Adventures number 15, which was an adaptation of the episode entitled The Final Decision. This issue did not have that title, The Sleep of Reason, which is definitely a combination of words.
Yep.
But, okay, so here we are. This was the issue was written by Ralph Macchio, not the Karate Kid. Sadly, for the longest time, I thought that after the Karate Kid, the guy went to work at Marvel Comics.
Oh, I would have loved that.
I'm right there with you.
You would have loved that.
Penciler Andrew Wildman, inker Jeff Albrecht, letterer Michael Higgins, colorist Tom Vincent. Now, this was the culmination of the first season, and it followed up on the Days of Future Past episodes, where the X-Men prevented the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly, or so they thought. But they go back in, and we'll get into it. They do a good job of recapping it in the issue. First of all, it opens on a riot triggered by the abduction of outspoken anti-mutant presidential candidate Senator Robert Kelly at the hands of an assailant everyone assumes is a mutant. The assembled X-Men, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Storm, Rogue, Gambit, Jubilee, and Professor X, assess the situation and provide a brief recap of the story thus far, referencing but not repeating my favorite line of the series. It is in the episode recap, which is when they go into Senator Kelly's office, there's a hole in the wall, and the X-Men are like, what's going on? And
I don't believe this is the work of the same gang.
Why not, Professor?
Because my watch has stopped.
I don't understand. Why is that important?
Because it's been magnetized.
So anyway, they're convinced Magneto has abducted Senator Kelly, and would you know it, they're right. Magneto has taken Senator Kelly to the hold of a ship off the Atlantic coast to deliver a speech before killing him.
Okay.
His oratory is interrupted when a Sentinel bursts in, made mostly from non-metallic parts, and manages to blast Magneto before Magneto uses some of the debris around the ship to shear the robot's arm off. However, it escapes with Kelly in tow. The X-Men have used Cerebro to track distortions in the Earth's electromagnetic field, because it can do that, and arrive to find Magneto wounded, but not with the six-pack abs he shows off in the cartoon. The one-armed Sentinel delivers Kelly to an abandoned mine in Pennsylvania where Bolivar Trask, inventor of the Sentinels, has set up shop with the Sentinel manufacturing Master Mold after the debacle in Genosha a few issues or episodes earlier. But Master Mold announces he's done taking orders from Trask, and in dialogue that I can still hear from the cartoon, says he's going to remove his brain and replace it with a computer.
Oh.
Diabolical.
Yes.
So Professor X probes Gambit's memories of Genosha to find out who is in charge of the Sentinel program. And here's where we get into a little suspect editing, because the computer screen that they use to identify the person with facial recognition tech clearly shows and labels Bolivar Trask. And Cyclops says, yep, that's Henry Peter Gyrick, all right. I think it was just an error, but the way I like to explain it and earn a no prize is that Cyclops misread it because of his ruby quartz visor, but accidentally named the right guy anyway. So anyway, the X-Men go after Gyrick, stopping his limo in a storm-generated blizzard just after Trask has called to tell him that Master Mold has gone rogue. Sadly, we are denied the iconic animated series moment of Wolverine sitting on the Lincoln Memorial's lap and cutting Gyrick off, but nevertheless, he spills the beans on where the Sentinels are and thinks to himself, maybe the X-Men will die in the process. So the team spends half a page debating whether they should save Gyrick, but they're heroes, so that's what they do. Professor X tells Magneto not to be there when they get back. Cyclops, Gambit, Jean, and Wolverine climb in the elevator at the Sentinel's mine base while Storm, Rogue, and Jubilee prepare to deal with whatever giant robots they flush out. Just like in the cartoon, all that is aboard the elevator when it hits bottom is a charged playing card, but sadly we don't get a word balloon of a Sentinel saying, "It appears to be the Ace of Spades," before it blows up. The Sentinels head to the surface and get picked off by the trio of X-Ladies, who are joined by Professor X in the Blackbird with an itchy trigger finger. Back underground, Jean tries to telekinetically pull Kelly away, but a Sentinel spots him, so it's fighting time. Cyclops ineffectively blasts Master Mold, who zaps the X-Men right back. The tables turn when Trask uses the laser with which he was supposed to remove Kelly's brain to heat up a propane tank, resulting in a really slow explosive reaction. The X-Men and Kelly make a break for the surface while the Sentinels fly back down to help Master Mold. Once the X-Men are above ground, everything starts shaking and Master Mold erupts out of the ground. But before he can blast anybody, Professor X flies overhead in the Blackbird, causing the robot to look up, thus exposing his neck to Cyclops' blast. Apparently, there are a lot of joints, and they're less concussive blast-proof than the rest of the robot. Then Professor X flies around and cuts his head off more with the plane before parachuting to safety. Kelly realizes the error of his ways. The Beast gets released from prison, where he'd been since episode and presumably issue 2, and Scott pops the question to Jean. But unbeknownst to them, a rather sinister individual is watching from a distance.
Ooh, oh my. Next issue, The Wedding of Scott and Jean. The coming of a bold new villain, the return of an old friend, all in the premiere issue of X-Men Adventures Season 2. Oh boy. Man, lots of action here. We got Master Mold showing up. I will say that I am impressed with the art. That's one thing that I'll say about my issue as well. They do not slouch on the art when it comes to, oh, this is just going to be a recap of what's happening on TV. We're going to take the teleplay and make it a comic. There's some effort put in here for sure, and it looks great. So Andrew Wildman, good job. Good job.
Wild man.
He is a wild man. Says it right there on the cover. He's a wild man. Yeah, man. So the Sentinels versus the X-Men, not much of a more classic other than Magneto versus the X-Men, in my opinion. So, I mean, what are your thoughts here, Evan? You covered what happened in the comic. What are you thinking?
Well, it got a lot of the beats from the episode, but it just didn't quite translate. I mean, two of the things that I really like about the episode is the moment when the X-Men are debating whether they're going to go rescue Kelly. You get a little bit of that in here, but I don't know if it's just because it doesn't really jump off the page when you're reading it. Watching the episode, I mean, with them going back and forth, I mean, of course they're going to go, but there's actually some drama in it and some emotion in it. And this is just, are we going to go? I don't know. Yeah, let's go. That's the impression I got anyway. And then Magneto still says, "Oh, well, you're just going for no reason." But his farewell to them is less dramatic. And Magneto does not show up and fight the Sentinels with them in the comic. He does in the episode, which is another epic moment.
Wonder why they didn't do that.
I don't know, because I mean that's one of the things that always stuck out to me with the X-Men when I was getting into it is, okay, here's their number one villain, and half the time they're kind of on the same side with him reluctantly, but he's a cold-blooded killer, but yet you kind of understand him, and sometimes they do find themselves working together. And so that was kind of a bummer. And I don't know, I'm not saying the dialogue in the episode is necessarily better, but it works in audio, and some of the dialogue in this just feels a little flat. And also you detect a little sarcasm, I'm sure, in my synopsis, but the idea that Master Mold's immune to Cyclops' blasts unless he looks up, when he clearly blasts his head off and then the plane takes it off again. Now, you can say that Professor X conveniently having a Wile E. Coyote-sized order of TNT and other explosives in the plane is a bit ridiculous, but it works a heck of a lot better in the show than, I'm just going to cut his head off again.
It's interesting that you talk about the whole translating thing, because Chris, what were we talking about where you had a very similar complaint about
Darkman, maybe?
Yeah, it was Darkman. It didn't translate it, and that was a live action movie to a comic. You would think a animated show would translate a little bit better. But yeah, Evan, it sounds like there's a couple of things in here that it just missed the mark.
I don't quite understand it. I mean, it had a lot of the elements, and I understand maybe certain things work in the animated and audio medium that don't work in print. So I see them taking some liberties, but yeah, why you would not have Magneto in there. And I get if you think the Blackbird full of explosives is a bit ridiculous, but I'm not sure that this one did it any better.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing that is really lost is the part where Master Mold activates all the Sentinels to go after the X-Men, and you have that just very distinctive sound, the Sentinels booting up. And they try to recreate that scene. You see just the long line of Sentinels and the eyes lighting up, but it is not the same as on that show when you see that and they start lighting up and you see just how many Sentinels there are, and that sound keeps hitting and trailing off, just giving you an idea of the scope of it. I mean, they recreated it in 2 panels, but it works so much better in the cartoon. I mean, obviously they couldn't do exactly that in a comic book, but I don't know, they didn't. It just didn't translate, and they didn't find a way to make it work in the comics. I don't know whether that's a close up and then a big splash showing just the size of it or whatever, but it's just, even though a lot of the elements were there, it's not nearly as effective as the show was.
Interesting. I will say that 2-page splash, though, well, somewhat 2-page splash of Master Mold coming out of the freaking ground. That's an awesome
Captain America chest there.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, man. He looks pretty wicked.
That's better than the visual you get in the cartoon. I'll give him that.
Okay. Did we decide, were we going to pick panels for everybody's, or is just the person doing it picking the panel?
I wanted to pick it for everybody, and since Chris and I usually agree on most things on these episodes, I'm in favor as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, before we get to the panel picking there, did you have any thoughts on this issue there, Chris?
Yeah, I do agree, especially with the Sentinels. The show really benefits from the sound design, the robotics, and the energy and humming and the voice of Master Mold and the Sentinels and stuff. That is definitely going to be more impactful in the cartoon. Devil's advocate for Cyclops blasting the Sentinel's neck. We do get Professor X explaining that a little bit with saying, I was certain such a structure of swiveling parts would be vulnerable. So he it seemed like he knew that was kind of going to be a weak point that maybe Cyclops could exploit.
Also a way of validating that to the reader too. Hey, I know you guys are going to pick on this. That's why.
I do feel the use of sort of teamwork of Cyclops and Professor X working together. I like that a little more than the way they do it in the comic. I mean, in the animated series, but I do get your complaints.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree that them working together, I'll buy that, and maybe I could have. I mean, yeah, he did give a reason why the neck was weaker. It's the fact that it looked like they did it twice. Yeah, really takes me out of it. But yeah, you're right. They do explain that, and the teamwork element does work better thematically than the Wile E. Coyote approach. But
does the Blackbird explode? In the comic, it doesn't, does it? He just flies through it and then he ejects.
Yeah, I guess it took so much damage he had to let it fly through. Yeah,
I was, dude, stick with the Blackbird. You should be able to.
The other place where the cartoon succeeds is they do make references back to some stuff in the episode and the issue. Days of Future Past, Magneto, the earlier Sentinel stuff, but where in the show. Gambit, there's a great sequence where Gambit and Wolverine are just in this one tunnel, just facing wave after wave of Sentinels, and Cyclops goes back down to get them, and he said, I'm not leaving anybody behind this time, which calls back to Morph supposedly dying and Beast being taken prisoner. And they try to do that, but everybody goes up at the same time, and Storm says, we X-Men have a knack for remaining alive, and Cyclops goes, all except for Morph, lost when we first battled the Sentinels. My fault, too. And it's just that one's so... it's just so on the nose. I mean, they wanted to call back to it, but it was almost Cyclops saying, "I feel bad because we lost Morph," whereas in that episode he showed it and went back and did it without just explicitly stating, "I feel bad because of Morph."
Yeah.
So I thought that worked better there too. Again, another cool moment that I'm not. I mean, maybe it didn't fit in space wise or whatever, but I don't know. Just I'm not sure why a change was made. Of course, I don't know how exactly this worked. Maybe it was primarily an outline of the episode that they got rather than the full script. So that could be the reason for some of the changes. I don't know.
True. That's a good point. I mean, they may have only had access to limited information, and
so maybe they didn't change it. It was their interpretation. I meant to go back and look at the release dates because I really do feel I got that third issue when the third episode came out, but obviously I doubt they were coming out weekly. So maybe I'm getting some of that mixed up. So, but that could be it. Is just they had outlines to work from, and so maybe some of the changes were just they didn't know exactly how they were doing it. So each of the writers kind of interpreted it the way they wanted to.
Did you get to go through any of the extra stuff at the end and pick anything out?
I didn't end up reading through that, but the way they do it, the Xavier files that they call them, it's different angles of each character, and it reminded me of the way in the credits they had the 3D versions of each character kind of spinning around and listed stats about them. So it was an on-the-page version of the final credits of each show, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I thought of that as it made me think of the old Marvel Handbook.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see clearly they're emulating the show because it shows them kind of turning in a circular way too. Yeah, very cool.
And Wolverine's even holding his hand in his claws at that weird angle.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But yeah, that was neat. I did not go through and read it. I was just like, oh, I know all about their powers and abilities. So,
well, you need to hold on just a second because as I was scanning through here, I just read Rogues. All right, I'm going to read this to you. A lot of this sounds familiar to me. Some of this, though. All right. Rogue possesses the mutant ability to temporarily absorb the memories, powers, and personality of anyone she comes in direct contact with. Okay, yes, I do know that. Due to an as yet inexplicable circumstance, Rogue permanently absorbed the memory and powers of the original Ms. Marvel. The absorption increased her strength and imperviousness to bodily harm immensely. It also gave her the ability to fly unaided. And listen to this. And imparted a special seventh sense that allows Rogue to anticipate an enemy's offensive movements. Now, I did not know she had that.
Ms. Marvel had that. I remember seeing that in her stats from the old Marvel role-playing game from TSR.
Oh, seriously?
It's something that kind of faded away over the years. I think sometimes people will reference it if there's a reason to, but it's not talked about a lot.
I was going to say, wow. I never.
No, they did do an episode where they brought Ms. Marvel in and kind of flashed back to that.
Yeah, I think I saw the cover for that in season 2 as I was scrolling through them. It's either season 2 or season 3. All right. Well, I mean, are we picking panels? Is that what we want to do here?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, it's your book there, Evan. Feel free to say what you want.
You already kind of talked about it, but Master Mold erupting from the ground with Liefeld cap chest. I mean, that's one place where the comic does it better than the episode. I remember he was kind of standing. He just blew the top off a mountain and was standing in a mountain.
Okay.
So that was a little weird. Still an awesome episode, but yeah, that's a great page anyway, and said actually does it better than the show.
Okay. I'll pick one here as I was scanning through just to kind of look for something to grab. I think I'm going to go with the very next the next page where Cyclops is cutting his head off. Well, partially cutting his head off because somebody else has got to finish the job. But that is
a cool looking. Yeah, it is a cool looking panel.
Yeah, that's a cool looking panel where he's getting beheaded. Chris, you got one?
Yeah, I got page 20, panel 2, I guess. It's a full page, a splash page that's covered up by a few other panels, but it's Wolverine, Cyclops, and Gambit going to town on some Sentinels.
Nice.
All three kind of shoulder to shoulder almost.
That's pretty cool.
That was on my short list.
Wow.
I do Wildman's art. I think he might have been he may have done all the first series or season 1 or whatever. I think he did the first issue anyway. I think there's other artists on the other issues, but he is kind of the sweet spot between kind of an anime, like a cartoony style, and like the kind of a facsimile of Jim Lee, kind of really dynamic art, 90s style artwork. I think the other issues we're going to talk about, I think the art is a little too close to the standard 90s stuff. I kind of like it more when they kind of evoke the animation a little more.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, you mentioned him as that bridge between animation and the comic. I mean, he has his resume, the later issues of Transformers.
the original 80s series? Or?
Yeah, issue 69 through, it looks like issue 80. So that would have been the 1990 to 1991. That's right as the series, I think, is getting ready to end. I think that's, I believe we talked about, it was me, Dean, and Derry, I believe, talked a little bit about Wildman and what he did with the final parts of the Transformers, because he was also doing the G.I. Joe series. He is penciling for that too. So there's another cartoon somewhat related. And even on top of that, Captain Planet and the Planeteers, number 9 and number 10.
He was the go-to guy.
He was. All right. Well, there we go. That's our discussion for the first comic, that was X-Men Adventures number 15, season 1.
I did have, before we move on, was there anything else from the episode, Evan, you wanted to mention? Because I had a few notes from that.
I don't think so. But if you come up with a good one, I'll go, oh, yeah, me too.
Well, for one thing, in the scene where Gambit's mind gets read, we see a little cameo of Ghost Rider, which was really cool back then.
Ooh.
And each of these episodes, I don't think it happens in any of the actual issues, but I think all of the episodes have little cameos that I'll point out. But there was the Ghost Rider one in this one. And when Wolverine fights the Sentinels in that dark tunnel, Gambit and him kind of get separated from Cyclops. It's not in the comic, but in the show, they get separated, and Wolverine tries to kind of save Gambit by closing him off and taking on the Sentinels himself, and they're in the dark. And whenever they shoot their blast, it lights up the room, and Wolverine's jumping around, dodging them. That was really, really cool back then, and it's always stuck with me as one of the coolest scenes from the series.
Yes.
But that's it pretty much for you. Mentioned all the other stuff from the series that was different, from the show that was different. I do want to also point out Master Mold, who is inherently silly. Why would you build a bigger Sentinel to make Sentinels?
Right.
He's also awesome. And also Jesse, the evils of AI on full display here. So
look out.
Yeah. He decides that these little mutants are humans, so if we protect humans from mutants, we just got to protect humans from themselves.
Oh, wow.
And somewhere James Spader as Ultron says, this guy gets it.
That's it. That's all I got.
Okay. All right. So next up, which one we're getting ready to get into the second season?
It's X-Men Adventures number 4, season 2, number 4.
Okay.
Also written by Ralph Macchio. This one penciled by John Herbert, inked by Greg Adams, Michael Higgins letterer, Carlos Lopez colorist, and Kelly Kavors editor. Based on a teleplay by Ted Peterson and Francis Moss. This one is called Red Death. I believe the series, or the episode had a different name. Red Dawn, I believe, was the name of the episode. But when a Cold Warrior mutant super soldier is revived in Russia, Colossus seeks the X-Men's aid to halt his attempt to take over the struggling country's government. Wolverine has a history with the villain known as Omega Red, but will that be enough to defeat him? Yes. Also, Professor X and Magneto are in the Savage Land, apparently. And for some reason, Professor X can walk. So that's pretty much all I got for a synopsis.
Okay.
I mentioned before, not as big a fan of John Herbert's art. It's actually good, especially his Omega Red in the first appearance of him. He looks awesome.
Yeah, he does.
But it's more of just like standard traditional comic book style. There's not much of the animation that's similar to the animated series. I do love Omega Red's costume and the look of Omega Red. It seems like he's one of those 90s characters that's kind of a joke. Nobody seems to like Omega Red.
I always thought he looked awesome.
He looks really cool. He's got those tendrils, which is a unique thing for him. Yeah.
Sage really likes him in current X-Men continuity.
Oh, really? I don't know who Sage is. I don't think.
Tessa used to work for Sebastian Shaw, and then she was supposed to have been Professor X's double agent. But yeah, she felt bad for him and had him resurrected and put him on X-Force.
Nice. That was nice of her.
Yeah, it's weird.
I didn't mention in the synopsis, but Colossus goes to get the X-Men's help, and the only one there is Jubilee. So she just puts a note up on the refrigerator. She's going to the gym and says, "Gone to Colossus' hometown to stop some guy named Omega Red."
But look, she provided all the relevant information.
Yeah, and it worked. It got the rest of the team there eventually.
Really, the person whose judgment we have to question is Colossus's. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You can't drive, but take me on a plane to Russia.
14-year-old girl can fly me to Russia and help me fight this evil beast. The appearance of Wolverine in Russia, it's almost like he teleported there.
Yeah,
By the time Colossus has caught up to Omega Red, Wolverine is right behind him. There's some cool stuff with the fight between Wolverine and Omega Red. This is the one that it seems to me is the most different from the animated series episode. For instance, for one thing, the Professor X and Magneto stuff that happens at the end of this issue is the opening to the episode, and then we don't really go back there. But in the book, it's at the very end. And then Wolverine is the one that finds the note initially in the animated series and goes off by himself. And then later on, Rogue, Gambit, and Storm show up. So Gambit's not even in this issue, but he does show up to help him out at the end. And they say, "Hey, we found this note that Wolverine must have left in the trash." Luckily, so we managed to show up here to help.
So he's even less responsible than Jubilee in the episode.
Yeah, he doesn't. He just immediately takes off. Doesn't try to get anybody else to come along. He's defeated Omega Red before. He thinks he can handle it. These sequence in the comic where Rogue hits Omega Red with the tank, that's actually Colossus in the animated series because they're not there yet. And Dark Star takes more of an active role in the animated series than she does in the comic too. And also, one thing that was weird in the comic is Rogue, she gets attacked by Omega Red with the coils, and she says she's immune to those because of her own power set. But in the animated series, she is not immune. She is greatly affected by them. It has to be saved by, I think, Gambit or one of the other characters. So this one's quite a bit different, but it's got all the same. The broad strokes are pretty much the same. Although it does not have my favorite dialogue from the series, which is pretty much why I picked this one. I don't know if that's why Evan picked his, but when Wolverine shows up and confronts Omega Red, he has the classic line. I don't know if I can do an impression, but I heard some fools thawed you out, so I'm here to put you back on ice. And he does. They managed to do so thanks to Storm's abilities, which I noticed when Storm's fighting the Sentinels in the previous one we talked about. She's just Electro with the power of flight. She doesn't really use any of her other, which that happens a lot, it seems like, in the animated series. Occasionally she will use storms, winds, and snow and stuff, but she pretty much seems like she's Electro most of the time, just using lightning to do stuff. But yeah, I prefer the... When you
throw around lightning bolts, do you really need to get fancy with the other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is going to be the most effective most of the time. Did I mention the cameo? Oh, no, I didn't. The cameo in the animated series... When we see the flashback of Wolverine dealing with Omega Red in the past, we see there's an image of Captain America in the Russian lab, which is kind of what they were trying to do with Omega Red, was make their own version of Cap. And Maverick also pops up in the flashback, helping Wolverine take down Omega Red. So, but yeah, I do prefer the animated episode to the comic, but the book is pretty good. And even though I complain a little bit about the art not being quite what I would prefer for this series, the art is good, and there's some really cool splash pages and cool fight sequence stuff with the Omega Red and Wolverine and Colossus and stuff.
I was going to say there is some pretty dynamic paneling going on here and some of this stuff, and 2-page spreads too, which look really cool.
There's also at least one major editing snafu.
With looking like Storm.
Yeah, where Storm, it looks like Storm is yelling to Darkstar something about her weather control powers, but it's Darkstar speaking to Storm, but they colored it Storm.
Oh, jeez. Oh, wow. All right. Well, let's pick a panel then. Let's see what we've got going on here. So, Chris, it's your book. Pick a panel, buddy.
I'm going to go with page 2, the big splash page of the reveal of Omega Red in all of its glory.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's busted out, smoke all over the place. He's got the tendrils flying all over the place. Okay. Yeah, he's pretty imposing. Evan, you've got the next one, man. Go ahead. What panel would you pick?
I'm kind of torn because I assumed somebody else would pick the one that's probably the coolest, but then I had the one that stuck in my mind the most. Jesse, do yours. I want to see.
Well, then that's easy. I'll do the 2-page splash of Wolverine versus Omega Red.
There you go.
Sick double-page spread. Colossus's prone body underneath Omega Red, and of course, both these guys have their teeth bared and they're yelling things at each other. I can remember the first appearance of Omega Red in the comics, and this cover reminds me of that. It's not exactly. I mean, if I remember correctly, the way Omega Red's first appearance, the cover of that is you just see the tendrils coming at the X-Men, and Wolverine's right there in the front. So that's kind of exciting that we get Omega Red of all people. And again, you already mentioned how it's neat to have this look of the Jim Lee X-Men. That kind of lets you know that, hey, we're not going to be sticking around with some of this isn't going to be the old X-Men. You're going to get some newer stories, and you're definitely going to get some newer characters. And at the time, I mean, this is 93, 94. This dropped in May of 94. Well, cover dated May of 94. Omega Red hasn't been around very long.
Right.
Like maybe 2 or 3 years. But he was a cool.
And didn't get used a whole lot.
Right.
He had a couple 2 or 3 issue arc in that Jim Lee X-Men run, and then I don't think he showed up very often.
Right. Cool looking character. If you're going to see him in a cartoon, you're going to want to know what more could this guy do? How's he going to fare against the X-Men? Was Colossus a big part of the animated series? He wasn't, was he?
Just this episode and the Juggernaut episode.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So again, that's another way of getting more of this universe, the X universe, into the cartoon, and of course right here in the comics. So all right, so there you go. I took the easy one for sure.
Okay, well, I couldn't leave that one out there, but the one that stood out to me, I will say, what was the artist's name again?
This is Wildman, isn't it?
No, this is
John Hebert.
Yeah, John Hebert, or I have no idea.
I think I
said Herbert
like
earlier.
the Saints quarterback, but he does look like he's trying to channel Jim Lee on a lot of this, but he really does a distinctive Colossus. And page 5, the 5th panel, not only for the look on Colossus's face and all the stuff flying at him, but the dialogue. In my country, we would never waste goods in this manner. Your profligacy angers me. Now, there's a guy who really learned his English.
Mm-hmm.
Profligacy.
But just the look on his face, it's a very distinctive Colossus. It also, Colossus I come and go with Colossus. Sometimes I think he's like the most boring X-Man, and other times I think he's pretty cool. But it's nice to see innocent, idealistic Colossus again, sounding like Russian Superman. How dare you be ungrateful for the groceries you have when other people are suffering? I don't know. It's kind of silly, but I like it, and I really like the way he draws Colossus.
Profligacy, reckless extravagance, or wastefulness in the use of resources.
Yeah, oh no, he's using it correctly. He knows English better than me. But I don't know. I like that panel. I like his Colossus. I like the dialogue. And I'm pretty sure the word profligacy was not in the episode.
Yeah, I bet you're right. Just take a look here at what John H. has done in the past. I just want to take a quick look and see what I can find. There he is. Oh, okay. Well, he's definitely a 90s Marvel guy, according to this. First issue they have listed is Comico, Johnny Quest Special number 2, but he was doing some Punisher War Journal, and he did WCW World Championship number 12.
Heyo.
Championship Wrestling, that's right. Deathlock Annual, Deathlock 29. He's kind of a little bit of a journeyman there. Then he hit X-Men, and he started doing all of these all these issues from 3 to 13. 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13. So anyway, all right. We're moving on to the final issue of our coverage tonight, and that is going to be mine. So I chose Mojo. So December of 1994. Same pencils, John Hebert, Ralph Macchio on the script, Greg Adams on inks, Michael Higgins on letters, Andrew Triana on colors. And yes, this is X-Men Adventures number 11. Said dropped in December, or cover dated December of 1994. Just to talk a little bit about what drew me to the issue, and that is definitely the cover. I don't read too much with Mojo in it. And I was really curious to see how they supposedly had handled it in the series, how they handled Mojo. I do know a couple of things about Mojo, and one of is the relationship that one long shot has with Mojo. So I knew that one of the few X-Men characters I don't really know a whole lot about was going to be in here. We were definitely going to get some long shot just based off of that cover. And of course, Mojo, this slug-like spineless. Actually, I think it's has no spine. Wires that look like dreadlocks going right into his head. I think he has some things that are there to keep his eyeballs open all the time. Just a nasty-looking character who's pure. I mean, his only motivation is to get better ratings for his TV network in the Mojo world or Mojo universe, Mojoverse. Mojoverse. So, of course, this front cover of this comic has Mojo just grinning from ear to ear with the X-Men on TVs in the background. So, what are we going to get into? The death of the X-Men coming to you in Mojo Vision. That's right. All right. So the issue opens on the outrageous Mojo world or Mojoverse, where Longshot is filming an aerial dogfight sequence in hopes of boosting ratings for the villainous Mojo's television network. Now, say we're watching this happen on the TV screen, and we find out, of course, it's Mojo and Longshot were watching this together. However, he's just always in a bad mood, I guess is the best way to put it. He gets upset. He's berating and talking down to Longshot, and an argument occurs, and Longshot, I believe, leaves and says he's no longer going to be employed there. Mojo can stick it, brother. Well, Mojo's assistant Domos speaks up, and he suggests using some people that are in a dimension close, I guess, or maybe far away, I don't know, another dimension. These characters called the X-Men. If he could somehow get them over here, he could use them to up their ratings of Mojo's network. And this is an idea that Mojo loves. So on Earth, as the X-Men are shopping, well, first off, it's Jean and Scott looking for a TV because apparently Jubilee, I think, busted the one at the mansion. So they got to try to find a replacement. They're looking all over the place. And all of a sudden, out of just nowhere, Mojo decides to make his move and sends his 6-armed programmer assassin. I don't know if she's an assassin. I probably put that on there. But she's definitely a TV master controller programmer person who shows up and transports all of the X-Men who had heard a ruckus, came running in, and sure enough, all of the X-Men are now transported to the Mojoverse, where they find themselves trapped in a rectangular force field. Spiral kicks off the first program. So they're already, okay, show's starting. And she takes Storm and Cyclops and puts them into a boat in a show called Miami Nice. So Storm and Cyclops are in the midst of this action scene where they're going down or going across the ocean in this boat. They're getting shot at by these airships, and Cyclops ends up getting shot. Storm thinks that he's possibly killed. The boat gets shot and explodes. And oh my goodness, are they dead? No. Mojo has transported them back into their prison. So he's using them again to get the ratings up. Now, Storm, I think, unleashes her powers at one point during that, but turns around and she ends, like I said, it almost looks like they both die. But Mojo brought them back into the force field before they could suffer any fate such as that. Now, next up, it's Beast, it's Rogue, and they are both thrown into a sci-fi show called Rogue Star, where their spaceship is being attacked, I believe, and they're able to escape. However, the ship careens out of control and heads straight into a blazing sun. But before they could die, Mojo grabs them both, and they are back into the prison that they were once. Our ratings going up. I think Mojo's very pleased. TV watchers are tuning in. Next up, it's a spy thriller called I Dream of Jean, where Wolverine is thrown into a situation with Jean Grey. Wolverine, I think, starts the episode out in an elevator shaft that ends up exploding and catching fire. So Jean starts to think, okay, there's something going on here that I might be able to influence. And she starts to use her telekinesis or psychokinesis to where she is able to kind of peel back a little bit. Plus, they get a little bit of help from Longshot. Longshot shows up, throws a switch, and Jean is now brought back into where Mojo's at, but she's not in the force field, and she's able to free the rest of the X-Men. And they are obviously using whatever means necessary to escape the clutches of Mojo. First, by blowing his little spineless butt backwards and off balance. And then with Rogue's help, Wolverine collapsed a part of the building onto Mojo. Spiral, sensing, okay, well, hey, this is about the end of things. She decides to transport the X-Men back to Earth. And in the aftermath, we see Spiral and Longshot leave Mojo trapped under this beam, who is pleading for them to return. However, they do not. And I think Longshot tries to take Longshot shoots a shot at Spiral, I believe. It seems he may possibly be trying to get her for a date. I can't remember. Spiral's not interested in any type of freaks, though. So she's only got 6 arms. He's got 4 fingers. It'll never work. All right. That was bad. So in an aftermath, we're still in the Savage Land. How long was Magneto and Professor X in the Savage Land?
The whole season.
Jeez Louise. So they're still walking around. And Magneto's like, hey, yonder, there's the Citadel that I created. And Xavier's like, oh, wow, that's pretty nice. And at about that time, a young Shauna, Kazar's, if you know much about Kazar's significant other, Shauna shows up, Shauna the She-Devil, and she appears to be in some type of distress. She does not see Magneto or Xavier, if I remember correctly. But out of nowhere, Sauron shows up, does his hypnotism to Shauna, picks her up, and flies towards the Citadel that Magneto supposedly created. Magneto's like, look, dude, we do not need to get involved in this crap. This is Savage Land stuff. And Xavier's, nah, man, we have to. I've got to find out what's going on. Let's head toward the Citadel. So that's kind of where we end the issue. So there it is. That is the synopsis for issue number 11. Is that what it was? Issue 11 of X-Men Adventure Season 2. So who watched the episode? Chris, you said you watched it, right?
I did.
Okay. All right. Well, what are your thoughts there comparing the book to the episode?
This one was fairly close. One of the things that was interesting about the episode is a lot of the cameos type stuff. Well, for one thing, the opening is different because the opening of the episode is kind of Longshot's version of the X-Men title theme, where it's just like more like a series of different adventures he's been on cut together rather than just one. And then the comic, it's a chase sequence from one of his shows.
Okay.
The abduction of the X-Men is a lot more drawn out in the show. I think in the comic, it's 1 or 2 pages of them looking at the TVs and they get captured. But in the show, it's several minutes before Mojo talks to them a little bit and they get creeped out and say they're going to leave, and then Spiral shows up. But the crowd in Mojo's arena or whatever,
yeah,
you can see what looks like a scroll in there. There's what I could only think of as the block-headed gray robot. Had to look him.
Awesome Android.
Awesome Android. I had to look him up to find his name because I couldn't remember. But yeah. Evan knew it. The name of the Miami Nice is actually the Miami Mutants on the show. They changed it for some reason. The other names are the same in the book and in the show. In the Rogue Star sequence in the show, the Brood show up and attack the Beast. And then in the I Dream of Jean sequence, I guess in the comic it's supposed to be like, I'm assuming it's supposed to be a Die Hard thing, because I only think that because of the wife beater that they have Logan in.
You're right.
Yeah. It took me a minute to get that. Why is Wolverine dressed like that?
But in the show, it's a lot cooler. It's the Punisher is in there, and he attacks Jean, and we get a little bit of Wolverine and the Punisher at a moment.
I need to watch that episode.
And they show that they're androids that have
Finish recording, Jesse.
Dang.
they're androids that they can look like whoever, and one of them looks like the Punisher. I forget who the others transform into.
So we talk about these cameos. They are avoiding that in this book. It almost feels like they're actively
none of them
avoiding
are in the books.
Right. Crazy.
And then the two-head thing where Longshot tells Spiral, I used to date a girl with two heads. And in the comic, she just says, oh, sounds like a freak or whatever, and is disgusted. But there's a really bad joke in the episode where he says, I used to date a girl with two heads. And Spiral says, was she nice? And he goes, yes and no. So,
that's a good joke. Come on, man. That's awesome. That's good.
Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as the differences. I did notice in the book, the Rogue Star sequence, it's more Star Warsy, but they're wearing Star Trek outfits. So I just thought, you got Star Trek in my Star Wars.
Wow.
And I do love a Bogey and Bacall reference, which Wolverine has at one point in the comic. But yeah, pretty close to the comic, but not 1-to-1.
Okay. All right.
Or to the cartoon, I should say.
So as far as my thoughts on the comic itself, I have a feeling, and you could probably answer this, Chris, but did it seem to flow in the comic as well as it did in the animated series, or did it feel like something was missing? Because I can tell you, just to get my thoughts out of the way real quick, this felt okay. Got the X-Men, throw them into a thing. They're out, throw them into a thing, throw them out. Okay, they're done. And then the comic ended. I mean, it felt so quick to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the animated series maybe doesn't seem as rushed as maybe the book does. I said they spend a couple minutes on them in the electronics store or whatever. And also with the animated series, Mojo has that really goofball soundtrack that follows him around. He's supposed to be funny, kind of a crazy, goofy character or whatever, but it seemed like maybe it does flow better in the cartoon than it does in the comic. Because you're right, it does seem like everything is kind of rushed. We got to include this and get from this point to this point to this point to this, and include everything from the show and get it all done in 22 pages, which for whatever reason maybe was easier to do on screen than it was in a comic book.
Yeah, I mean, by the time they put the beam on top of Mojo, Spiral's okay, you guys are out. See you later. And she transports him out of there.
Yeah.
This felt like an episode, I guess, of the series when it comes to like, okay, this is going to be a one and done kind of deal. This doesn't feel impactful to me. This feels, I mean, even Longshot, I was hoping Longshot would come back with them to Earth and join the X-Men. That's obviously what I thought was going to happen, but no, he's just there to kind of help them. And then he sticks around and he's making jokes with Spiral after that.
Yeah, well, the episode seemed more episodic than the show normally is, because a lot of the storylines in the show sort of flow into one another, whereas this was just kind of a one-off lark for the characters.
Gotcha. All right.
With the exception of Professor X and Magneto and the Savage Land.
Yeah. Evan, do you recall this episode at all?
I do remember the episode. It took me a little bit to think back to the shows they did. I think maybe part of the reason I'm trying to figure out the way to say this, because I agree with you, it feels really rushed in the comic, but I think maybe part of it is that seeing this in animated form and moving pictures was something new, but when you get to the X-Men and Mojo in a comic, we've seen that before. Yeah. So seeing it animated on a show was something new, and this was almost like when you put something into Google Translate and then you translate it back and it's not quite the same. That almost feels kind of like what it is. The animation is adding something to it and pulling it back into the comic. Not that comics are less than animation, because there's different things you can do, but I don't know. It seems whatever was new and different with the cartoon just isn't there when you put it back into comic book form. Maybe that's the way to say it. And again, I mean, I like the art in it, but you can see that I don't know if they were just having to rush to put it out or if the editors just weren't paying attention. But when the X-Men start to escape, Cyclops says something like, The vacuum tubes, they've shattered. We're free, but where's Jean? And Beast says, you have but to move eyes right, Scotty boy, to ascertain the sole remaining cylinder containing yon vision of loveliness. But there's one cylinder, and it's empty. The dialogue does not match the art. And then Jean's over there doing something else, and it's just... I mean, now, I work at a newspaper. I've made mistakes in editing, so I'm not trying to rag on somebody because it's easy to do when you're looking at it. But it's, I don't know, it gives the appearance that somebody just wasn't paying attention. Not saying that that's the case. I don't know what was going on. They may have been editing 15 other things and had a crazy deadline or whatever. But it just, in all three of these issues, we found some not insignificant mistakes where the art and the dialogue just don't match up.
Well, all right. I'm going to pick a panel unless you guys have something else.
Nope.
All right. It's panel time. And I am going to go with, I'm not letting any of you guys take the Mojo first page there. This is the second page. I guess the first appearance of Mojo, full appearance of Mojo in the comic, which is right where the title is, "The Trouble Is Not in Your Set." As Mojo, again, another grin ear to ear, his sickly, bloated Jabba the Hutt form with wires coming out of his head. Yes, get me the X-Men. That's the one I'm going for. All right, Evan Bevins, you got a panel that you would pick out of this?
Mine is slightly before that. Let's see. It's page 1, 2, 3, 4, which only has 2 panels, but it's the bottom one where Longshot's walking out and Mojo has hurled a TV at him.
Yeah.
So, in this Longshot, I always thought of Longshot. He's another one of those characters that I really like, disproportionate to how much I've actually read of him. But I always thought of Longshot as, he's kind of happy-go-lucky, but more of a freedom fighter. And in this, he's just ticked off because his show got canceled.
Right.
So he's only a hero because he's only a hero because he benefits the X-Men, or the X-Men benefit from his actions.
Yeah.
But Longshot's always been a character I thought looked cool. The luck powers. So, but I like that with him storming out and the TV hurtling behind him.
All right, Chris, what's your panel, man?
I just got a simple one page. It's page 13, panel 4, which is there's the TIE fighter looking spaceships firing on the X-Men.
Oh wait.
Just kind of going with my Star Wars love.
All right. Yeah, those things are pretty cool. Okay. Well, we did it. There we go. That was issue 11 of X-Men Adventures from season 2. And we've covered three issues here. What was your issue again, Evan?
X-Men Adventures season 1, number 15.
And Chris?
I did season 2, issue 4.
There we go. All right. Let's get into plugs. Evan Bevins, you can go first this time. What do you got to plug there, sir?
Well, over at *51.blogspot.com, you can find my writings about comics, movies, comics about movies, movies about comics, everything in between. Working my way through the Amalgam comics right now. First up is Super Soldier, then Bruce Wayne, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And also check in on every other Friday. I have a feature #Free Comic Friday, looking at what we've gotten over the years on Free Comic Book Day and at other points when they've tried to see if Free Comic Book Day can come more than once a year. And occasionally you can also do a search for #Dollar Tree Cinema, and you'll find all sorts of movies you've heard of, movies you haven't, and all kinds of stuff that you can find at Dollar Tree, although the selection's been dwindling lately.
Oh my! Yeah, that's going to cut in. That's going to cut into some blogging. Nah, you got plenty of those.
No, I have bought a lot of movies from Dollar Tree.
All right, Chris Armstrong, what do you got over there, man?
Yeah, I've got another podcast I do with my buddy AJ called Small Screeners, where we talk about direct-to-video and made-for-TV movies. Recently had an episode on The Night Flyer, Stephen King's The Night Flyer, horror movie that premiered on HBO back in the 90s. By the time this is out, there'll probably be an episode on Elvis also out, where we talked about John Carpenter's made-for-TV Elvis biopic with Kurt Russell as Elvis. We also recently did an episode on our favorite stuff from 2023. So we can find all that on the Small Screeners feed on your podcatcher of choice. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky at BrodyMan34. And you can find my Letterboxd, Disco Shrew on Letterboxd.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Unspoken Issues podcast on the Source Material Comics feed. And yes, you can check out all sorts of comic related podcasts right here on this feed, obviously starting with Unspoken Issues, where we focus solely on 90s comics. We have a good time. That's me, it's Evan, it's Chris, it is Dean, it's Derry. We're talking 90s comics all the time on this here podcast. So feel free to check out some previous episodes. Also, the Source Material Comics podcast, where we don't have any specific era. We just grab a story and we talk about it. Grab it and talk about it. And that's what we do over there too. So you can check out some of those. Don't know if Evan mentioned Snap Material or not. I can't remember, but
I did not. Sorry.
No, I could take care of that right now. If you like to play the mobile card game Marvel Snap, then we have a podcast for you where Evan Bevins and myself get together once a month and talk about previous season, the upcoming season. We got our top fives in there. We have also a discussion on some of the unlocks that we get, and we just have an all-around good time. So check that out if you enjoy playing Marvel Snap. You can also go to the YouTube channel. I think it's the Source Material YouTube, where I put me and Evan battling AVX style, Avengers versus X-Men, where, hey, I took the X-Men. Evan's really surprised.
Yeah.
I took the X-Men as the X-Men versus the Avengers, and we had a good time over there. And so you check that out too. I mean, you can watch us play Snap and complain about things, and yeah, we have a good time. So, all right, that's it. We're out of here. That is Chris Armstrong. That is Evan Bevins. I am Jesse Starcher. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.